What is up, Stallions fans? Your Birmingham Stallions survived against the Houston Roughnecks, dodged a bullet to keep that undefeated record alive. We're going to talk about it on this podcast, and I'm going to tell you why this game does not concern me despite the close score and it coming down to the wire. This is State of the Stallions, and your host, Luke Miller. Thanks for tuning in.
Here we go. Hey, giddy up on three. 1, 2, 3. Giddy up.
Buzz when you're around this city. People have fallen in love with the Birmingham Stallions. Here we go. We're getting a little juice going.
And Birmingham is going to win the USFL championship.
So what a game. I normally release my recaps on Monday morning, but this one was just too good. I couldn't wait. I had to go ahead and get it out there while it was fresh on my mind and while I was still so excited about it because just what a fantastic game, both in terms of the game on the field, the energy in the stands, everything going on at Protective Stadium. Couldn't say enough good things about this Birmingham Stallions franchise and all that entails. And we really got a great picture of that in this game on Saturday night primetime television and in the stadium at Protective Stadium. I thought overall the team, they could have played better, but they did play very well. I thought the offense especially had a great game, 35 points against a very good defense. Certainly nothing, to bat an eye at. Adrian Martinez continued to make his case that he is the best player in this league and the MVP. The defense obviously gave up more points than they're accustomed to, but they sort of, rose to the occasion when it mattered and did enough to get the W, and that's really all that you can ask for. And then how about the fans? I mean, we had the shirtless pyramid thing a couple weeks ago when the Stallions were at home and had a multiple hour rain delay and it was pouring the rain. And, these guys just sort of made the most of it, took their shirts off, were playing the air guitar and, cheering for the team in the end zone and all that kind of thing. And kind of since then, there's sort of been rumblings that like, oh, we should keep this thing going. We should sort of keep this thing alive. And, we tried last game, but I think people were really locked into that game, it was kind of all eyes on the field and people, didn't get too crazy outside of really being, again, zoned in on what was happening with the game. But we did get a little bit of shirtless action in that one. And then tonight it sort of took off and took a life of its own. And shout out to the guys that were there that got that thing started and got it going. It just snowballed. And it was awesome to see just the massive throng of shirtless dudes in the end zone, hyping up the Stallions. I think this is the kind of thing that this league and these teams need. I mean, you look at St. Louis, obviously they've got the Battlehawks, they've got the Cacao thing, they've got an incredible fan base there. And then you look at DC, they've got a thing going, even when their team's kind of, despite the ups and the downs, because of the beer snake, because of the size of Audi Field, because of just kind of the energy that they've really captured there. It's really helped, I think, them sell tickets, grow their profile, grow the fan base. And Birmingham, despite this being our third year, we're still finding ways to connect with the city and kind of grow the fan base organically. And I think something like this, as silly as it is, as fun as it is, I think is a great way to show people that not only is this a really good football team, but this is also a good time, right? Some of us who follow this really closely and religiously, like me, we don't need convinced. We don't need an 8-0 team to think that it's worth going out to these games. But you got to think a lot of casual fans, the majority of people are sort of on the opposite end of the spectrum where it doesn't matter if it's an 8-0 team. They still don't really see why it's worth taking time to go to these games. But you start showing them that not only is it really good football with really good teams, but it's also a really good time for a very affordable price and you can have a lot of fun. Whether you're in the shirtless section or not, you can kind of feel that energy and be a part of a great, family-friendly weekend entertainment. I think that's really going to help catalyze the Stallions sort of fan base and crowds to a new level. And so I'm really excited to see where it goes from here. I hope I don't know, it might not be a shirtless pyramid anymore. It might be now a shirtless square or a shirtless rectangle because it's sort of growing. But I thought it was awesome to see, and not only just again for sort of the energy and the growth of the fan base, but also just for what they brought to the field. I mean, Skip Holtz talked about it in the postgame press conference. They were loud, they were excited, they were going crazy, and that was really helpful down the stretch when the Stallions needed that kind of energy, that shot in the arm, especially when they were on defense. So So yeah, shout out to the Stallions fans. I think they rightfully were getting a lot of love for the way they showed out tonight, despite the terrible weather, despite some other things that were going on in Birmingham. Again, a game that a lot of people were saying was meaningless. Like, still had over 10,000 people show up for this game, and again, bring a ton of juice. Which was awesome to see. So let me just kind of quickly break down the game and talk about why I'm not worried about this game, despite how close it was. I'm not saying I'm not worried, because I think that the Stallions again are unbeatable and are just guaranteed to run the table from this point out. Obviously, if you've been listening to my shows, you know that I don't think that's true. One of my key points after last week's game was that the Stallions are beatable, and again, they continue to demonstrate tonight some of their weaknesses and some of their flaws and some of their vulnerabilities that maybe a better team could exploit. But that being said, I'm still not too worried about this one particular game. And I'll give you three reasons why. Number one is this was sort of the perfect trap game. The Stallions are undefeated, 7-0 coming into this game. The Roughnecks are 1-6. Nobody's given the Roughnecks a chance. They just found out that they're guaranteed not only a spot in the playoffs, but guaranteed that the game will be at Protective Stadium. So there's nothing that they can do. Even if they lose out, that's going to be the case. So in a sense, again, I talked about it in my preview for this game. In a sense, I don't think this was a meaningless game. I don't think the team thought it was a meaningless game, but you certainly could portray it as that. On top of that, they're coming off a huge game against the Battlehawks where it came down to the wire. It took everything in them to get that W. It was so hyped up. There were so many people there. Like, you're going from sort of the highest of highs, not to the lowest of lows, but to a game that, again, doesn't sort of match that same energy level, that sort of same level of expectation. And so coming off a game like that, it's very easy, I think, for a team to not perform to the best of their ability. And on top of that, they were playing the Roughnecks, which again are formerly the Gamblers, which is the only team that we have never swept in a season. So talked about it on the show. Lots of people have talked about it, that Houston has had Birmingham's number for one reason or another. They just have, and they came into this game tonight, and that was the case. They, I think, played really well. I mean, frankly, let's be honest, this is kind of their Super Bowl. They have nothing left to play for. This was their last shot of the year at beating us, which I'm sure they really wanted to do. There's been a lot of jawing back and forth between these teams. So, like, they were going to bring their best game, and they did. And, given that fact, I just, again, because of all those things and the fact that we still were able to pull out the W, it just doesn't concern me as much as it maybe otherwise would. And another thing to think about is, the second point I would make is, defensively, we struggled, but there was a lot of, I think, factors that go into that. And two that I think are worth mentioning. One is the fact that our defensive coordinator, John Chavis, who's called our defense every game going back to 2022, wasn't present at the game. He was sick. At least according to the broadcast, they said that he should be able to recover and be fine. It wasn't that serious, but it was serious enough to keep him from traveling to Birmingham for this game. So Corey Chamberlain, who's our secondaries coach, who's actually from Birmingham, who I've talked about on this podcast, called the defense. He's a great coach, great mind. He actually won a Grey Cup in the CFL as a head coach about a decade ago. So, like, he's certainly up to the task. But it's a big adjustment to go from the guy that's called your defense every single game over the, more than 30 games over the past 3 seasons, to somebody who's never called the Stallions defense before. And obviously they're going to have a little bit of different approach. They're going to have a little different, knowledge of the team and what they can do and can't do. Obviously, Coach Chamberlain knows the secondary really, really well, but he hasn't been the defensive coordinator. He hasn't coached the linebackers like Chavis has, or maybe been as up close and personal with the defensive line. And so, I thought Chamberlain did a good job kind of being thrust into that position, but again, it's not really it's kind of an abnormality that won't carry over in the future, hopefully. Praying that Coach Chavis recovers and is good to go for the rest of the season. But I think, given that fact, I'm willing to give a little leeway to the Stallions defense. And the second thing I would say is the Roughnecks threw Nolan Henderson out there, who hasn't really played much this year. And he has a very different style of game than Reed Sinnett, for example. He's much more mobile. He's able to create a lot of more things with his legs. I don't know if the Stallions knew that was coming or expected that or really prepared for that. Now, you could make the case that they should have been prepared for anything that the Roughnecks might throw their way, and that's maybe a valid point to make. But when he hasn't seen the field all year, and you don't have really much tape on him, there's only so much preparation you can maybe do for a guy like that. And so I think that was kind of a wrinkle that the Roughnecks threw in that actually really helped the Roughnecks, and credit to them and credit to Nolan Henderson for a great game that he played. But I think that maybe made it a little bit harder for the Stallions to respond to what the Roughnecks were doing. So I think the defense struggled a little bit more than usual tonight, but I think they were still able to get the job done and pull out the win. And again, it's part of the reason it doesn't worry me so much, because I think those are things that easily can be adjusted and corrected and addressed in future weeks. And then the last thing I would say, again, the reason that this doesn't really concern me too much is because the Stallions found a way to win. I mean, again, that's what it boils down to. I was on a podcast at the beginning of the week last week with Jaron Horton was on there, who's the former Pittsburgh Maulers defensive coordinator. And obviously he understands this stuff a lot more than I do. But one of the things he said was, some teams just find a way to win and some teams just find a way to lose. And the Stallions are a team that just finds a way to win. And tonight a lot of things didn't go their way, right? Turnovers, stupid penalties, kind of big mistakes at the wrong time, letting the Roughnecks convert over and over and over again on third down, letting them convert on fourth down and keep drives alive. I mean, there's a lot of things that, again, could be corrected and need to be corrected out of this game. But despite that fact, the Stallions were still able to find a way to win. And I think that's a testament to how well-rounded this team is, right? For example, last week you saw the special teams really struggle, but it was okay. It worked out in the end because the defense and the offense played well enough to pull out the W despite some of the special teams mistakes. This week, the defense kind of struggled a little bit more than has been the case. But that was okay because, again, the offense was able to put up 35 points. Part of that was also due to the special teams and the way that they were able to play and flip the field and get points and all that kind of thing. So, I think the Stallions, the good news is they're such a well-rounded team. They have so much depth. They have so much talent. They're so well coached that they're able to, sort of handle some pretty big mistakes on either side of the ball and still find ways to win. And in some ways, that's, more impressive to me than if Houston had come in and just laid down and we just walked all over them and moved on to the next week, right? Like, I think it's really important that this team is tested, that they're challenged, and that they, again, find ways to win despite that fact, which is what they did tonight. So did I want the game to be as close as it was? No. Did it stress me out a little bit? Yes. But do I think overall it was a good thing for the team? It was a growing opportunity for the team. It's something the team can build on. Yes, I think all those things are true. And again, that's why this game, despite how close it was, doesn't concern me. And I think, this isn't so much related to the Stallions, but league-wide, I think there's a lot more parity in this league than you would expect given some of the records, right? Like, yes, the Stallions are now 8-0, the Roughnecks are now 1-7. But the Roughnecks, I mean, they're not as bad as their record sounds. They should have beat San Antonio last week. They were obviously very close in a game with us tonight. They've had some very other close games. The same is true for Arlington, who's only won a game. Same is true for Memphis, who's only won a game too. So obviously those teams aren't as good as teams like the Stallions or maybe the Battlehawks or Brahmas or Panthers. But I think the gap between them isn't as big as their record sort of indicates. And so, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I think it was a great game. I think it was a great way to respond by the Stallions. And I think it was a good test that they passed, and they can carry that momentum on into the remainder of the season. Real quick, let me give my star players the game while I'm here because these guys deserve some recognition. Well, my one-star player this week, actually the same as last week. It's also going to be A.J. Thomas. So last week, A.J. Thomas got an interception on the Stallions' opening defensive possession and picked up right where he left off this week. Another interception on the opening possession for the Roughnecks. He also had 4 tackles to go with that, 4 solo tackles and a pass deflection. So again, in a secondary that's been a little bit depleted, that's been a little bit thin, he's continued to step up and be a huge piece for us and a game changer. He now is tied as the league leader in interceptions in the UFL. And that's despite the fact that he was a backup for the first sort of half of the season. So shout out to AJ. He's been balling out really huge, the contributions he's been making to us. And so I got to recognize him again and give him another star. As far as my 2-star player, actually going to be the same as last week as well. I'm going to go ahead and give that to Adrian Martinez. Adrian continues to ball out. He was 19 of 31 tonight for 173 yards with 3 passing touchdowns. He also had 6 carries for 44 yards and 2 touchdowns. All 5 of our touchdowns he accounted for. So, I mean, a game where you have over 200 total yards and 5 touchdowns. It's pretty impressive. And like I said earlier, he continues to sort of cement himself as the best player in this league and make his case to be the league MVP with what he's doing on the field. The only reason I didn't give him 3 stars is just because I thought there was another guy that I really needed to recognize this week. And once again, it is another linebacker. But this week, unlike last week, it's not Kiava Tizino. It's actually DeMarcus Gates. And I've been waiting to say this guy's name for one of these awards because back in 2022, I thought he was the best player on our team. I thought he was the most clutch player on our team. I thought he was sort of the glue that held our defense together. And I couldn't have been more thrilled when we got him back this year. He's been a fantastic piece for us on the defense and really anchored our sort of linebacker core, despite some of the ups and downs that they've gone through personnel wise. And he's been great for us this year, I think, but he hasn't had sort of the same marquee games or the same sort of highlight reel games that he did in 2022. And I think there's a few reasons for that. One reason is that, again, the Stallions just have a lot more depth and he's rotating, I think, in and out more than he would have a couple of years ago. Again, they've got other guys now like Kiava Tizino, who we talked about, and Elijah Sullivan and Damon Lloyd. And obviously he was splitting time with Scooby when Scooby was healthy. So he's played really well. He's been a leader on the defense, but he hasn't has been maybe as dominant or hasn't needed to be as dominant as he was in previous years. So he's been more of just a really solid piece in a overall sort of group of guys that have been really solid. But tonight, I felt like coming back from his injury in a game where we could have really used him last week, but we had to sort of survive without him. And guys like Kiava Tizino really stepped up to make that happen. But getting him back this week, he really, I felt like, stole the show. He led the Stallions with 8 tackles, 5 of which were solo. He had 1 tackle for loss. And then, of course, he had the game-winning sack on the last play of the game, which was huge, to not even give them a chance to throw up that Hail Mary and potentially tie or win the game. And so shout out to DeMarcus Gates, massive, massive piece for the Stallions, not only this season, but just over the past couple of years. And can't say enough good things about him, and so happy to have him back for us. And when we really needed him tonight, he really came through for us on a night that the defense sort of otherwise had some struggles. So going to give my 3 stars to him for this week. So that's going to do it for this show. Thank you again for tuning in. Sorry I got the preview of this game out a little bit late. If you want to go back and listen to it, it is out there. You might have missed it because I didn't put it out till Saturday morning. But in lieu of that, or to make it up, I decided to get this out early. So this is out here on Sunday morning instead of Monday morning like usual. So you get an extra day to jump in and listen to it, and hope you enjoyed it. Shout out again to the Stallions fans. Shout out to the Stallions players. Shout out to Coach Skip Holtz, Coach Chamberlain, and the rest of the staff, Zach Potter, everybody who makes this thing run. The Stallions are 8-0, 4 wins away from an undefeated season and the first ever UFL championship and a three-peat as the Stallions continue to assert their dominance in spring football and establish that they are, in fact, the kings of spring. Giddy up.